What's up, peeps? My guest today is a relationship builder, cultivating and transforming young and old minds into productive ones. Casanova Brooks is also a successful entrepreneur, real estate agent, investor, influential speaker, and CEO. No stranger to tough times, he's been faced with hardships that most never come back from. In his sophomore year of high school, he was diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. After 2 years of chemo and fighting, he was in remission. Emerging as a fighter, stronger than ever, he soon after lost his mother. The story seems like the end, but it was just the beginning. And we're going to learn a lot more about the life of Cass and his story of doing the impossible. Hailing from Omaha, Nebraska by way of Chicago, Illinois, Casanova, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be here.
Awesome. So I really enjoyed, as I was mentioning before we went live, really learning about your backstory. You got a lot of content out there, which is awesome. So there's plenty of ways for people to get to learn about you, and really got to enjoy to digging into it. So before we get into the kind of Q&A piece of this, I'd love for the audience to get a glimpse into the life of Casanova and who you are and what it is that makes you tick.
Yeah, I'd say first and foremost, I think you let out with the words that I am a relationship builder. That's what I like to classify myself as. And more importantly, I would say some way that I could resonate with anybody who's listening right now is I'm a dreamer. I believe that everything starts with a dream. And those of us who dare to dream while the rest of the world is settling for what society tells us is our reality, we're the ones who stand to be trailblazers and change makers. And ideally, we stand to make this world a better place. So for me, that's really who I would say that I am. It's always been a fun journey for me. It's always been a time that I felt like I was gonna be bigger and I had more things to do when it came to impacting and influencing. And so it's been a lot of fun for me on this journey.
Great. So speaking of the journey, I'd love for you to kind of give us a glimpse into that journey. So tell us about that journey, not only how you got to where you are today, but sort of the backstory that really made you into the man that you are today.
Yeah, so I would say I originally started with my mom and grandma. I was raised by two strong single women, and they kind of paved the way for me to, one, have emotion, right? Because we all have emotion, and to be able to tap into that, but at the same time, be able to have resiliency. And so when I was growing up south side of Chicago, inner city, for me, the big thing was I never had a dad or an older brother or sister, or anybody who could show me the way or show me the ropes. So for everything, for me, it was a lot of trial and error, right? I had to learn on my own, and I had to really just every time I was exposed to something new, it caught my attention. So it was something that I always knew that I wanted to do big things, like I said, but I never knew how I was going to do those things. For me, it was just always understanding that I had a bigger purpose.
So you mentioned a couple of things. So sort of, the really premise behind this show is for the audience to see themselves into the guest. Sort of, I have this mentality: if I can, you can. I feel like you're sort of, from your messaging, the same way. Where you come from doesn't really need to be where you end up. So knowing that there's a lot of people out there who will resonate with your story and kind of understand, okay, came from humble beginnings, went through a lot of tragic, difficult times in life, didn't stop you. I remember reading somewhere or hearing on one of your videos, you hit rock bottom. But what rock bottom for you was the beginning to get it together and move forward and kind of make some changes in your life. So knowing, all those things that you've been through and some of the hardships, what advice would you give to people tuning in? That's something you've learned that you'd love to share with them?
Yeah, well, I always say, like, of course you tapped into it a little bit as far as my journey of having, childhood cancer, as well as losing my mom, my job, and my home within a matter of a couple, weeks. It was always trying times for me when I was going through those types of waters. But I told myself always that joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain. Right? Understanding as well that, character is built in adversity. And so for a lot of us, we're going through things right now. I mean, if we look at our in this world, there's so much uncertainty because we're all going through a pandemic in some way or another. On top of that, we have a government that they only give us about 10 to 15% of what we need to know, whether rightfully so or not. So we're always uncertain of like how much of this is the truth. Are we really in secure times or not? So for me, it was always about just keep taking one step forward, right? And understanding that we have different seasons in life. You know, for you, I don't know, where are you located again?
Connecticut.
Connecticut. Okay, so you at least had, you know, being up in the Northeast, you at least see some winters. Am I right? Right. So for some people that are maybe in California, and the reason why I was thinking, because it looks like you could be potentially about to go surfing or hit the beach, you know, you look like you have a pretty good tan and everything's looking good for you. So what I was saying was, potentially if you're in like California or something, yes, they have good weather all the time, depending on where you are there, right? If you're in sunny San Diego, you're always experiencing 70 to 80 degree weather. Whereas when you're in a place like Omaha, or if you're in a place like Connecticut, you have 4 seasons. And once you're getting done with winter, where potentially you've been cooped up in the house, or, you know, wherever you stay, if you're in the office or wherever, for 3 to 4 months, now all of a sudden when springtime's hit, you can't wait to get out, right? You've been preparing for this. You've been focusing ahead rather than, oh my God, we have, you know, 0 below temperatures and we also have 4 inches of snow that's coming today. We're thinking about, oh my God, I can't wait until March hits so I can see brighter days. So I think for me, even at the times where I lost everything, I was always focused not on where I was, right? Because, you know, where I was currently at did not mean that was where I was going to be in 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year from then. So that was always a focus for me. And that's what I would tell anyone else. You know, whatever your current situation is, that's not your final destination.
And with where you're at today, you know, I know you've had some amazing success in the real estate space. Even, you know, coming in there, a lot of times people, I know plenty of people jump into real estate and kind of say, oh yeah, and it's kind of dabbling. They don't find success immediately. A lot give up, or it's kind of a side hustle that they kind of, you know, hit into once in a while. Seems like you went all in on real estate, found success very, you know, quickly because of the hard work and effort you put in. So what was that like, you know, jumping in, what made you choose real estate and, you know, jumping into that, what was it that made it such a success for you?
Yeah, so for me, I was always, you know, kind of an entrepreneur at heart. And the reason why I would say that is because when I was young, my parents, as my mom would always say, she was robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? So I just never had a lot of resources. Now at this time, of course, I didn't really understand that, you know, I was in poverty, but of course I had it okay. And I didn't know my situation was really even that crazy because you're living, you got food, you got parents who love you, as in my mom and my grandma. And so I was just living with what it was. And, but when I needed like extra money or, you know, any type of things that I wanted, I found myself having to go pave my own way. So like my first ever job that I remember in Chicago, I would go to like the gas station, me and a buddy, and we would stand out. When you would come outside of, basically, this was before they had cards that everybody was putting their card in the gas pump. So you were going inside to pay with your cash or whatever. You'd come back out and you'd see a little boy standing right there. And I would say, hey, mister, if you don't mind, can I pump your gas? And then you'd say either yes or no. And if you said yes, I was pumping it, obviously in hopes that you would give me some type of a tip, just like being at a restaurant, right? And so that was where I would find myself coming away with $15, $20, $25 in the span of, you know, it could be 4 or 5 hours, which was cool because it didn't really feel like I was working. I had my buddies, people would come up, and so I was making some money here or there. And then, so my whole life, I kind of took on that trait. Now, I'll tell you, once I started to get older, I did go to college at the University of Iowa for 3 years. But I was so young when I graduated at 17 that I didn't necessarily know I wanted to go to college. It was just a lot of pressure on me at that time because nobody in my family had went to college and definitely not graduated college. So if you can imagine, when you're a sophomore or when you're a senior, your second half of your senior year, everybody's having graduation parties and all these things. And what's the number one question that's being asked? Well, what are you going to do next, right? If you haven't already publicly touted that, hey, I'm going to some university. And so that question got asked to me a lot. And I was just like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I found myself going to the University of Iowa to make the story a little bit shorter. And my third year in, after my parents had dropped me off at school, and keep in mind, University of Iowa, we were living in Sioux City, Iowa at this time. So it's about 4.5 hours. It's between Chicago and Sioux City. So it's like right there in the middle. And so found myself going there. Well, my junior year, I had basically came up with an epiphany, and my heart believed that just because you had a degree did not mean you were going to be successful in life. Right. And so I was like, man, this is not what I want to do. So I called up my mom and grandma and I'm like, I want to get out of here. And they're like, first off, you could have just told me this, a couple of weeks ago before we just dropped you off at college and spent this money. And I'm like, I get it. But my mom and grandma, as they always did, they supported me. They supported my decision. They're like, are you going to come home, get a job and figure it out? So I had different jobs that I was doing. I mean, I probably worked about 18 different jobs. And so then I was always, as I started to gain traction, what I quickly learned through all of these jobs without going all into them was that it was really always about relationships and serving other people. And if you helped enough people get what they wanted, at the end, you would get more than enough of what you wanted. So, I mean, serving tables, selling cars, all these things. And I had a lot of success with them, even though I knew nothing about any of them prior to getting in. My parents never owned a house, car, business, nothing. So for me, that was like a big thing. And then finally, I moved myself here, and I moved myself, my wife, and my son, who at the time was 3 years old. We moved here to Omaha, Nebraska, and we were originally going to move down to Kansas City because it was bigger, it was more urban. They had sports teams like the Chiefs and the Royals, but because we didn't know anyone really in Kansas City, we figured Omaha was the halfway point, and I had a job opportunity there. So let's at least make sure that Omaha could work, because we're moving my son away as well, where we'll have no help. So it's like, make sure Omaha could work. And if it doesn't, then we can always just keep going south and go to Kansas City. And so at this time, I'm working a job. It's going really well. Well, I quickly learned in that corporate life that everybody could tell you no, but nobody could tell you yes. Right. So from there, I started to see things, and they had me leading all these like emergent leader programs and all this other things. Well, I wanted to try my hand at management, and they're like, Casanova, it's great, but we don't have that position available right now, but keep doing what you're doing. And I'm like, I see where this is going. Right. And so from there, I started to watch like YouTube videos and things like that, on the side. And I came across a mentor that I would consider, and he had said something called "Be the Lord of your land." Right. And I was like, wow, like I get that. But and he was talking about owning real estate. Right. So you could have your own choices in life. And I was like, I get it, but I don't know anything about owning real estate. My parents, nobody in my family owned it. So I looked deeper into his story, and basically I seen that at that time, he was now a developer, but he started out as a celebrity realtor. So I said, you know what? I don't know anything about owning real estate, but I do know how to keep building relationships with people. How about I get my license, help other people buy, sell, and invest, and then I could take the commissions, and then I'll be able to build real estate myself. And so that's the journey and the path that I've stayed on. Of course, again, adversity, as you said, was losing my mom early on after I got my license, but I wasn't doing anything. But that's kind of how my career in real estate started.
So when I know, again, kind of part of where you were when you kind of were, I know you were living in your aunt's basement, I think, and kind of, had really no prospects, which, a lot of people, you think about that, you're like, man, hey, this is a really low point in life, but you didn't. You emerged, you found success, you share that story. And what's the fuel? And maybe it hasn't changed since you were younger and overcame cancer. But what's the fuel that keeps you going? What's that drive? You wake up, those eyes open up in the morning, and you're like, game time. Like what is that? Or maybe those things that keep you going.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a couple of things. I think it's one, understanding that we were all created to be great. Right? It's just about who taps into their potential. And so when you look at that, for me, I know that my motor runs at 100 miles an hour right now, and everybody's 100 miles an hour is different, right? So mine 100 miles an hour is different than someone else's or yours or whoever's, but I understand that at some point my motor will not run this high. And a quote that, a buddy of mine once said, and it always stuck with me, but he said, if you really think about it, failure weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons.
Mm.
Right? Failure weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons. And so for me, I never want to look back on the life that I had and being able to be healthy for as long as I was, and being able to, when doctors said we have less than 1% chance of reproducing, now we have two beautiful children that neither one of them, thus far have had any type of real sickness. So we've been very blessed in life. And so for me, it's always understanding that I have an opportunity. If you think about Michael Jordan, and I talk about this, I'm huge into sports, right? But they just released The Last Dance, which was this past Sunday, and everyone was talking about it. But Michael understanding, the opportunity that he was gifted with, right? To be able to lead a team and to even be able to come in. There's very few people that have that gift that really tap into it. Not very few people that have it, because I feel like a lot of people have it. But how many people really tap into it and go all in? And that was a big for me, was understanding that every single day I got an opportunity to make not only my wife and my son proud, but everybody who calls me a friend, everybody who calls me a family member, and even who calls me a leader because they're on my team. It's after, in the beginning, you're building your foundation, right? And your foundation, for the most part, is all about you. You're trying to build your mindset, things like that. But then after a while, you start to actually build on top of the foundation. And in my opinion, once you build on top of the foundation, you're building a house, right? And when you're building that house, you're probably not the only one that's going to live in that house. Right? You're going to bring your family and your wife, your son. So you have to make sure that you have a solid foundation, because that's all of you. But at the same time, what are you really building the foundation for? So you can put a house on it, and that's what encompasses your family, your friends, your employees, your colleagues, whoever it is that you're going to be working with. So it becomes a team sport rather than a me sport.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people overlook what you just touched on. People, you think about externally, you're always worried about some how can I help this person? How can I help them? And if you neglect yourself and don't build up your own self as a foundation, everything else you do is going to crumble. So how good are, you mentioned your family, your wife, your kids, how good of a husband or a father can you be if you're crumbling on the inside? You're doing them a disservice. So I love that, because I feel like people they neglect themselves. And we do need to start with ourselves and build ourselves up, and thinking of ourselves, as a foundation in some ways is super powerful, because I think we overwork ourselves, and that neglect comes out a lot.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely agree.
So you said, I want to get into some maybe something that you feel from a perception standpoint, but I know you said you can feel empowered, you can accomplish anything you want because it's possible. So for you're someone who says, I'm going to put my mind to it, I'm going to get it done, and you've done that constantly over and over again. And I know I've seen some of your speaking where you've worked with students, which is an interesting demographic, because they're sort of open to learning, and then they're sort of also saying, hey, I like to figure out things on my own. So depending on the mindset of the audience in there, especially with students. But what's something that you've seen through your speaking engagements, through your interactions with people you deal with in the corporate world and in real estate, that something you see if you could change, if you could, if you had that power, and you're like, I see this all the time, and this is something that maybe it's not wrong, or maybe it's a perception, but something you would change if you could.
Yeah, I think it's the perception of just doing things the way. For me, I've always been somebody who's bucked this trend, bucked the system, right? And I've always just wanted to learn more. I've always wanted to be exposed to more things. So again, the normal in society is to go to school, get a good job, right? And you want to focus on, with that job, you get security. But if you look at it, for so many people, they really don't have security, because at any time, which we're seeing in this pandemic right now, people can be laid off. Right, your job can be taken, whether they just eliminate your position whether they just eliminate your position due to finding somebody else with a little bit more knowledge, or due to sheer automation, right? So there's lots of different ways. So you have to be willing to bet on yourself. And it first starts with getting the same knowledge and the same information that successful people had, right? I think in today's world, the best thing about it is you have YouTube, you have podcasts, you have the best teachers right there at your fingertips. Before, it was like if we wanted to go, get all of the high level stuff, we never had access to the amount of people who are winning in this world, right, than we do today. So for me, it was always about, I knew that I couldn't listen. If I was trying to be like the 1%, I couldn't listen to the other 99% of people. Right. That's what I think. Like, we're taught from an early age, right? Even at kindergarten, I would even say we're taught from an early age that you need to fit in, right? In a world where you're built to stand out, where you're built to not have any fear. If you think about children, the best thing about children is they have no fear. I got a 2.5-year-old daughter right now. Don't touch that. She's looking at it again and touch. What I just said, don't, and then it's crying, or maybe it's going to do it again, but luckily it wasn't hot, or whatever it might be, right? But they have no fear. And that's what makes children so beautiful to watch, is because everything is like, oh, okay, well, let's go ahead and try it. But yet when we become like 14, 15 years old, we've just been beaten and broken down so much by other people casting their fears on us. Because when I tell my daughter don't touch something, it's because I have a fear that she might get hurt. Right? Or I have a fear that she might break something, but she doesn't have that. And so for me, the perception that I want more people to do is to do your homework, do your due diligence. I get it that your parents or whoever else has told you this is the way of life, but it's only because that's the thing that they were told and that's all that they know. Right? If you start asking people, for the most part, if you ask people about, investing, what are the first things that they're going to tell you? They're probably going to tell you stocks or bonds, right? Only 5%, if that, of the world of people will tell you about investing in a crypto. Why? It's because they don't know, right? And they've never done their homework. And I'm not a crypto person, so I don't want to take this there. But I'm just saying the reality of it is, if we don't know, we say, no, go do the stock market. Go do real estate. But the world of it is there's going to be a lot of people who become billionaires, definitely millionaires in some form of fashion because of cryptocurrency. Right? And because they took the time to educate themselves on it. And there's always different perspectives. Here are different perspectives. And the best thing about it is we're not animals, we're not trees. We have a mind of our own where we can formulate our own decision and make sure that it's a calculated one that works for us. Because the reality of it is no situation or no investment or no avenue works 100% for every single person. Right? Because it's all based off of our own risk tolerance, our own anxiety. For some people, they want to go get in a big apartment buildings. For some, they want to go get in a commercial. They want nothing to do with residential, right? Everybody has a different tolerance. So for you or anybody listening to this, right, I would say, think about how gifted that you've been so far to make the decisions that's helped you to get to where you are today. Even by you just sheer listening to this podcast, you made a choice that so many people are not even able to make, right? You're making the choice to better yourself. So keep going off of your own intuition and keep getting more exposure to things that can help you to level up.
Well, if the audience wasn't taking notes right there, hit the back button, rewind that, and get the pen and pad out, because that was spot on right there. And I feel we do need to look at ourselves internally and realistically and know what we are capable of, because you nailed it. What works for someone else, what their risk tolerance may be completely different than what it is for you. So solid advice there. So thinking of advice, my favorite part of the show, I love to ask my guests to give them a chance to whip out their crystal ball or stand up and pontificate a little bit and give us a glimpse into the future. So where are we going to be in 5 and 10 years? And the floor is open to you on the subject. It doesn't matter. Just a chance to be historically correct here and where we're going to be. Yeah,
I think, in my opinion, one thing I keep saying is there's going to be a lot of people that have their situation reset out of this thing, right? And I think for everyone who's listening right now, your main goal has to be to develop some type of a skill, right? Whether that means Facebook ads, whether that means copywriting, whether that means accounting, whatever it is that you love, like figure out what's the skill that you want to get behind. Maybe that's videography if you love right now, right? There's opportunities. I think I read, and what do I mean by like they're going to have an opportunity to get their situation reset? Well, across the country, the average person was bringing in around $835 per week from what I've read. Well, normally if you were on unemployment, then you would get that cut into half. So you'd be getting somewhere around like $415. But for the average person, that's not an incentive for you not to try to go find another job. But for now, at least while this pandemic is still going on, if you're on unemployment, now you'll still get that 400 and some odd dollars, right? But then on top of that, you get an additional $600. So now this is an incentive for a lot of people to not have to go back to work, at least right away. And some people actually can't go back to work because they don't know when, things will open back up. So what I would say is listen right now to what your heart's telling you. Listen right now to like, what's that one thing that you think you can be what are you already doing every single day? Are you watching media and consuming it? Or are you watching media from a creative lens, thinking about how can I create a video like that? Right? There's a lot of people that are getting their situation reset right now because now they have time to actually go on and create TikTok videos, right? Nothing against TikTok, but now people have gotten 100,000 followers off of TikTok because they've tapped into their creative sense. Whereas with that job, if they were going there every day, they never had a time to do that, or at least they never made it a priority to do that. And so that's what I would say. And where I think that everything is going, I think that it's going to become a world of, honestly, a digital world. We've been thinking it, we've been seeing it. You look back 20 years ago, there was movies out there. There was a lot of things like even think about the Jetsons, right? The TV show, the Jetsons, we never thought we would see. Now we have drones out here. Obviously, we see more and more things that Tesla and Elon Musk are trying to create. And they're talking about drones delivering your groceries to like a locker, kind of similar to what Amazon does already. They have a locker, but so I think that everything will become more digital. I think a lot of companies, they were like, oh, we would never, there's no way, we always need brick and mortar. Now look at it right now. There's a lot of companies that have now been able to trim, not to say in a negative sense, but they've been able to trim some fat, right? And with that being said, that means that they've laid off maybe 20% of their workforce, but they feel like now they've laid off 20% of the payroll expenses and they're just as efficient, right? So now they're looking, and there's going to be a lot of people that says, okay, Zoom is a great platform, but how can we create something just like Zoom, but add a couple pieces in there to allow people to be able to live stream into Zoom, right? And not have to connect with a third-party platform like a Facebook, right? Or YouTube. Now, once we get this on here, you live right into my Zoom, and maybe it's not like a webinar, but it's just live streaming with you and I every single day. So there's a lot of different things, and it's up to that person to be creative. But obviously, if you can tap into that creative sense, there's a lot of opportunity behind it.
Yes, and that's the difference between watching content and consuming it, or watching, learning, and taking action too. And right now, that we have the time, I feel the same. I feel like some great ideas are going to come out of this. I feel like people who didn't focus on stuff or had a notepad full of ideas but just never got to it. Now is the time, and people are the creative juices are flowing, and there are going to be people who come out of this with something amazing that they've been putting off. So great prediction there. So where do we find you? And I'll drop everything in the show notes as well for everyone listening in. But where do they go if they want to learn more about you and seek you out, or maybe hire you to do a speaking engagement? Where are we going?
Yeah, so CasanovaBrooks.com is the universal place to find me. If you can find the podcast there, the Dream Nation podcast that I host. That's where you can find a lot of the information. But on top of that, if you want to connect with me on social, I'm very active on Instagram. I am also active on LinkedIn as well. So I'm pretty all over, but the universal place to find me is CasanovaBrooks.com, CASANOVA.
All right. We will link that for sure. Thanks so much for being on, sharing your story, and giving us some amazing advice to walk away with. Truly appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you having me on, Frank. And to everyone, my last thing is to, no matter what, remember, in the dream we trust, but we must take action, or otherwise it's only merely a fantasy.
There you go. Appreciate that.